Welcome to the Successful Life Podcast. I am your host, Corey Barrier, and I am here with Bob Burg. Did I say it right, Bob?
Hey, Corey, you sure did.
All right. I am so excited to have you on the podcast today. This is the first time that we have live streamed the podcast from Clubhouse. So, Bob, I have been a massive fan of yours for several years now. A good friend of mine, Brad, gave me your book, and he said you've got to go read this. It's right up your alley, and so I did that. I got the audiobook. And then I got the Go Giver, the Go Giver for sellers, and then I can't remember the third and fourth one, but I have all four of them.
Thank you.
So, Bob, I would love for you just to quickly tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and let's just dive right in, man.
Really began years and years ago as a broadcaster, first in radio and then in television. Worked for a very small ABC affiliate in the Midwest. I eventually was the late night news guy, but I really wasn't very good. And it wasn't long before I graduated into sales. And I say graduated into sales because to me, that was a real step up. I love the idea of it. There was something about it that just I really just enjoyed, and yet I was not very successful for the first few months. And the reason was because I had no prior sales training, no formal sales training, and the company where I was working, we'll just say that their sales training program was negligible at best. And in other words, it was non-existent. And what did I know? I thought sales was about just going out there, knocking on doors, making a lot of calls, and just blah, 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 telling people about your product or service. I had what Jim Rohn would have described as the motivation, but not the information. In other words, I was really working hard and had no idea what I was working hard at. And so I floundered for a few months. And fortunately, I made my way into a bookstore and was just looking for something that would help. I didn't really know what when I came across two books on sales. Now, that doesn't sound like any big deal, but 40 years ago when this occurred, books on sales just weren't as prevalent as they are now. Okay, so I really had no idea that was even a thing. And so the titles of the books were, to me, just fascinating because it's what? There's a methodology here. There's a way to actually do this. And one book was by Zig Ziglar. The other was by Tom Hopkins, of course, two of the legendary icons. I know those words aren't necessary to put together because if they're legendary, they're iconic. And if they're iconic, they're legendary. But nonetheless, that's how much respect I have for the both of them. They're legendary icons. And, I got their books, Corey, and I like to say I didn't read them. I devoured them. So I would come home after the workday and I would just sit there, books open, pen and highlighter in hand, and I would take notes and highlight and dog ear pages and put sticky notes on pages and actually, I don't even remember if I put sticky notes on pages. That might be an anachronism. Were there even sticky notes back then 40 years ago? I'm not sure.
Well, I don't know. I'm only 42, so.
Yeah, well, that's true. You're a youngin'. I'm 63, so it's, but yeah, and I mean, I would practice and I would drill and I'd rehearse. Well, 3 weeks later, my sales are going through the roof. And there was really no big difference in me other than that I now had a way of doing something. I discovered a system, if you will. And to this day, I personally define a system as the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles. The key being predictability. If it's been discovered that by doing A, you'll get the desired result of B, then all you need to do is A and continue to do A and continue to do A. And eventually you're going to get the desired result of B. And this was very special to me to realize it because I knew I was not the kind of guy who could invent a system. That's not me. but I can tap into a system, you know what I'm saying? And
I
apply it.
do.
And then and then apply it for, for my success, and then kind of gear it more toward, my personal style, and take some other things from different areas and kind of piece things together and develop a new one out of that. But I'm not the guy who's gonna invent the wheel, but I'll tap into the wheel that's already been invented, and I'll make adjustments.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so and then I also realized that part of sales was personal development. So I started getting all the classics that were recommended, starting with How to Win Friends and Influence People, The Richest Man in Babylon, Think and Grow Rich, As a Man Thinketh. And there were great books by Og Mandino, such as The Greatest Salesman in the World and Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz. And I just started getting it. I began building a library, really, of knowledge, of wisdom, other people's knowledge, other people's wisdom, which I could then turn into my own through the application of such. And eventually worked my way up to sales manager of a company, began teaching others how to do what was working for me. And then, as they said, I think, as they said on the Seinfeld show, yada, 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 30 years later, here I am with you.
This is beautiful. So, Bob, I got to tell you, there's actually a gentleman listening in our audience, our Clubhouse audience, by the name of Rocco, and he's, did a whole podcast, and we talked about. I mean, that was our common. Well, actually, we had one other common bond. We're both in the RTA Syndicate, but the other common bond was that we love your books,
Oh,
and
thank you.
you're welcome. And so, I haven't met a ton of people that have ever discovered your books. Although I also haven't asked a ton of people either. So. But I got to tell you, I've probably listened to your books th- 3 times minimum each. Just
Oh,
because
thank you.
I enjoyed it so much that I wanted to make sure that I absorbed everything in it. And not to mention, you're just a fabulous storyteller. I mean, the Pendergrass, it's Pendergrass, right? Did I say that? Did I say it right? Pendergrass?
What's that? Pendergrass?
Isn't that the guy's name? Pendergrass? In
Which
the
one?
one of the books. Maybe
Oh,
I'm getting
Pindar. Pindar.
Pindar,
Yeah.
Pindar, Pindar.
Main,
No,
the
no,
main
no
mentor.
ass,
Yeah.
no ass on it.
Or grass
Yeah,
or whatever.
or grass. Yeah. So yeah, Pindar. That was such a great story, and it really just, I don't know, it just drew me in. So I'm just a massive, massive fan.
Well, I got
So
to tell you though, Corey, that for the storytelling part, I can't really take credit for that at all. That's my co-author, John David Mann. I'm a how-to guy. I'm step 1, step 2, step 3. John is the writer. I mean, he is just a magnificent writer and storyteller. I can tell a story from stage when it's something that's happened and you put it together and blah blah blah. But he's a guy who can take a sentence and turn it into something magical. Whereas I'm just step 1, step 2, step. I'm boring.
well, I think it's interesting that you bring sales into this conversation because, well, that's what I do as I coach and consult folks on sales. And so
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
I don't even know if I really realized that was how your story started. And so I think it's super interesting that we're sitting here now and you're one of my favorite authors and we're talking about sales. So Bob, let me just ask you, I guess obviously you've traveled the whole world uh, around these books. So I guess give us a little bit of an idea, give the audience a little bit of an idea of, you know, what is it like to and write books like you've written and made such a change in people's lives? I mean, can you even take a gander how many lives you've changed through these books?
Well, I don't think it's something that I necessarily think about and am aware of until I hear somebody tell me. And then it's about the nicest compliment I could ever hear, because I think as human beings, we're designed to want to make a difference and feel as though we brought some value to the world that extends past ourselves. And so when I hear someone say that, I mean, I always just I take it as the greatest compliment, and I'm totally honored to hear it. And it's nothing I ever take for granted.
Yeah, well, that's you're a humble guy, which doesn't shock me at all. So I do have to ask you, the story of Pindar was that you? Did that happen to you, or tell me
Well,
about that?
well, basically the characters, Joe was named because he was the average Joe or Josephine. Anybody, we're all Joe or Josephine at some point in our life. In fact, we're probably Joe and Josephine now in a certain area if we're growing, because we're always trying to grow. So we start out, but Joe was the kind of guy, and I certainly was Joe early in my sales career, who didn't know that he was kind of doing it wrong. Okay. Because remember, he was young, he was ambitious, he was hardworking, he was out there, he was going after it, but his focus was just not in the right place. It was really all about him. And, as I started to do well in sales, okay, I got to a certain point of success through the how to aspect and through just knowing how to sell. But I was not, after a while, and especially when I went to a new company, another company that had a high, it was a high ticket item, and I was in a slump and couldn't seem to get out of it. And of course, the bigger the slump I was in, the more my focus was on myself, not on my customers, where it should have been. And I was a lot like Joe. So one day I came back to the office after a non-selling appointment. It was not non-selling by design. It was supposed to be a selling appointment. But
Goose
because of
egg,
my
goose
own,
egg.
yeah, because of my own ineptness, the sale didn't happen. And of course, the prospect who really should have bought, had I done my job right, he lost out on the benefits of the product or service. I lost out on a very healthy commission, and my company that I was working for lost out on a sale and profit themselves. So instead of it being a win-win-win, it was a lose-lose-lose, and I was the procuring cause of that lose-lose-lose. And I came back to the office, and I remember just sitting in the salesperson's lounge, and I was not little, I was very disgusted with myself. And there was an older guy at the company. I didn't know him very well. And the funny thing is, I say, a much older guy. Well, I'm sure he was my age now. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Decrepit old man, right? No. So, so I think he saw me as Joe, in the story that I would then co-author, whatever it was, 20 years after that, or 25, whatever it was. And he said to me, he said, Burg, he was a last name kind of guy. He said, Burg, can I give you some advice? And I said, yeah, absolutely. Please do. I need it. And he said, Berg, if you want to make a lot of money in sales, he said, don't have making money as your target. Your target is serving others. Now, when you hit the target, he said, you'll get a reward, and that reward will come in the form of money. And you can do with that money whatever you choose. But never forget, he said, the money is simply the reward for hitting the target. It ain't the target itself. Your target is serving others. Well, this was an epiphany for me, because it really, it was the first time I realized that great salesmanship is never about the salesperson. Uh, Great salesmanship is never about the product or the service, as important as those are. Great salesmanship is about the other person. It's about adding immense value to the lives of those you touch. It's about that other person's life being better just by virtue of you being part of it. And I came to realize that when we can approach selling that way, we're actually 9 steps ahead of the game in a 10-step game. Now, the premise of the go-giver basically is nothing more than understanding that shifting your focus, that's where it starts, shifting your focus from getting to giving. And when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others, is not only a more pleasant way of conducting business, it's the most financially profitable way as well. And not for some woo-woo, way out there, magical, mystical reasons. Not at all. It makes very rational sense when you're that person who can take your focus off yourself and place it on others, on making their lives better, right? On helping solve their challenges, on helping bring them closer to happiness.
That's
Okay.
right. Yeah,
They feel good about you. They
that's
want
right.
to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be in relationship with you. They want to buy from you if they need what you offer, but they definitely want to tell others about you. They want to be your personal walking ambassador. So when you create these kinds of relationships, you're really creating that what we call benevolent context for your success.
That's right. Because at the end of the day, people buy for their reasons, not yours,
Yeah.
right?
Corey, that's so true. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken at a sales conference, right, in front of thousands of salespeople. And I've started by saying, well, I'd say, let me ask if you agree with the following statement. How many of you agree that nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet? And we all laugh because we know that's absolutely true, right? Nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet. They're not going to buy from you because you need the money. And they're not even going to buy from you because you're a really, really nice person. They're going to buy from you because they believe they'll be better off by doing so than by not doing so. So you bring
Right.
up a great point.
It was interesting. I shifted my perspective on selling when I realized it was a few years ago, and it was and Think and Grow Rich. Well, Tony Robbins was my first introduction to personal development, and then Think and Grow Rich followed shortly after that. And I just didn't realize as a salesperson that I was showing up as the guy I didn't want to show up as. I showed up as the guy uh, that just wanted the money, right? I just wanted the commission, and I took a job or I started a business because I wanted to make the money. But at the end of the day, that didn't work. I mean, it just
Right.
didn't work. So so for me, this rings very very true in my world. If as long as I'm serving the person, if I'm consulting with a business or I'm coaching a customer or a client, my goal is to get them to the finish line. My goal is to get them the result that we agreed upon.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and that result doesn't really matter how much money they're paying me. Now, I will say that when people don't pay for things, let's just say consulting, right?
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
if people don't pay for it, they don't use it.
Well, it tends to be the case, right? It's, kind of human nature. But
Absolutely.
I, there are times people say, so, Berg, this go-giver stuff, are you saying money's, not important? Of course it's important. And there's nothing wrong with making money, a lot of money. And Pindar said that right in the book. Okay.
That's
So
right.
this is not something where we're saying, no, it's not, no, not at all. We're just saying that nobody's going to buy from you because you want to make a lot of money. So what you're going to do if you're doing it correctly is you're going to place your focus on that other person and understand that money is simply an echo of value.
That's right.
You're going to be paid based on the value that you bring to another human being, and embracing the value, by the way, so that you do charge what you should be charging.
That's right.
So yeah, that's why Pindar said to Joe, asking will it make money isn't a bad question. It's a great question. It's just a bad first question. The first question is, does it serve? Will it
Right.
bring immense value to another human being, to the marketplace? Because if it doesn't, then there's going to be no money to be made. By the same
Right.
token, uh, it can bring wonderful value. You can have a huge market for it, but if it doesn't make money, well, you've got yourself a hobby. And while hobbies are good, I suggest everyone have one, but that's not, you don't make a living off of a hobby.
That's right.
Um, and so it's both are important, but it's where the focus is. It's where the focus is. And that focus has got to be on bringing immense value to others. Then the money follows that value.
That's right. Have you ever heard anybody refer to uh, the salesperson that does show up only for the money as having commission breath?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. That was back 40 years ago when I first started. Yeah. All these things are,
It's so
commission breath.
funny because
Absolutely.
I had never heard anybody say it in that. I'd never heard that phrase "commission breath" until just probably a couple of months ago, and I
Oh,
thought,
that's
"Wow, that's
funny.
right."
Yeah.
In that,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I've been in sales for 25 years.
Yeah.
You know,
Maybe it
I've
was
been
one
in.
of those things that back in the old days when I was starting out, that was big. And then it kind of went away for a while. And now it's just coming back like an oldie but goodie type
Yeah,
thing.
absolutely. So, one other question that I did want to ask you before because we've got a few more minutes here. I wanted to ask you, do you feel like salespeople fail? Why do you believe salespeople fail?
Well, I think the biggest reason kind of goes back to they forget why people buy.
Yeah.
So, and that you've got to make it so that this person understands. You've got to be able to communicate value, understanding something though, and I think this is key because value can be defined as there's price and there's value, right? Price is a dollar figure; it's finite. It is what it is. Value, on the other hand, is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing? This product, service, concept, idea, what have you, that brings so much worth or value to another human being that they will willingly exchange their money for this value and be glad they did while you make a healthy profit. But here's what we got to understand: value is always in the eyes of the beholder. It's not what we think is valuable about this or what we think they should think is valuable about this. It's what they think is valuable about this. And the challenge is that sounds easy enough to do, but then we've got to understand that as human beings, we all operate from our own personal belief system, a set of
Mm.
subjective truths, not the truths, subjective truths, okay? Our truths, not necessarily the truth. And we grow up with this, whether it's a combination of upbringing, environment, schooling, news media, everything that comes into our lives. But most people go through their entire lives um, based on what I call an unconscious operating system, where they believe they're acting out of conscious choice and free will, but really acting within a matrix that they had nothing to do with constructing. Okay.
Right.
But here's the other thing. Here's the rub. Not only do we live our lives this way, and not only does that other person live their life that way, but as human beings, we tend to believe that other people see the world basically the same way we see it, which is intuitively makes sense. How could it be anything else? So that's why you hear people say things, oh, nobody would like that, or oh, everyone loves that, or I would never speak to somebody that way. Well, no, all these things are individual and personal, and it's not what everybody else thinks, feels, sees, does, believes. And so that's why you have a salesperson saying something like, oh, what I love most about this is blah, 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 blah. Who cares?
Right.
Our
That's
job is to
right.
find out what the other right, and it goes, of course, deeper than that, because depending upon what we're selling, we've got to be able to not only discover what they need, want, and desire, but we've got to kind of read between the lines and see those things that they don't even know that they need, or that they don't know is an issue, so that we can bring insight to the situation, so that they now know that there's something even more that they could, and so forth. But that it goes back to that biggest mistake being thinking that, not realizing that it's all about the customer. We logically know it, but
Right.
emotionally, that's not how a lot of salespeople act.
That's right. It's kind of like if you were to be working at a car dealership and a lady pulls up in a minivan and you try to sell her a Corvette, right? She pulled up in a minivan. So you may love the Corvette, but the woman doesn't need a Corvette. She needs another minivan,
Well,
right?
yeah, and
And so
especially if she says, I'm looking for another minivan.
right, right. So it's just
That's a
it
clue.
really
That is a clue right
that is
there, ladies and gentlemen.
So I think it comes down just to asking good questions, right? Sales comes down to asking good questions. And one more piece, listening. You've got to listen, right?
Yeah.
If I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next, and I'm not listening to the customer or the client, well, how do you think that makes them feel?
All right. Exactly. Plus, we don't really learn what we need to learn, because remember, when we're surface listening, we're really listening through our own eyes and our own ears, and we're understanding what we want to understand, again, based on our own belief systems.
Right.
So when we really listen, and we listen with our entire being, right, and we ask clarifying questions to make sure that what they meant is what we understood,
Right.
right?
That's
And we
right.
go deeper and deeper into it. Now that's a different type of listening that not only shows them that we really do care, but it helps us to actually understand what this person really is looking to accomplish.
That's exactly right. Bob, listen, first off, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the podcast today and doing this interview. Like I said before, I'm a huge, huge fan.
Thank you.
I'm just so grateful to have you on the podcast. And if you could, Bob, would you like to leave the listeners with just a piece of advice? Maybe if they're in sales or listen to this, or maybe they're selfish and they're in sales. I guess the best piece of advice would be go read your book. That'd be the first one, right?
Well, I mean, there's lots of great books out there, really, that are just so fantastic. So I wouldn't limit it to one book. I'd say go out there, if you're just starting, and even if you're not, just start building a library of knowledge and wisdom. Get those books that have been proven, from How to Win Friends and Influence People, all the way through Anthony Norino's and Jeb Blount's books, and Grant Cardone's books, and get Zig Ziglar's books, and and you're going to find things in all of them that are going to really help you to put things together.
There's one book that you didn't mention that I was hoping you were going to mention in that list, and it's David Sandler,
Oh, that was a great book.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's so I do all my coaching and consulting literally
Mhm.
through the Sandler sales
Yeah.
model.
Sandler has a great model, and any of their coaches are so knowledgeable, and they really care about the people they work with. And I can't tell you how many people I've met through the years who told me that the Sandler sales system has just been a magnificent addition to their business and has helped them so much.
So much. It's because if you work the Sandler sales process,
Hmm.
you'll get the end result. And
Yeah,
and look, the end result may be a
it's a
no,
system.
but you'll
Yeah,
get one way or the other, you'll get the answer.
yeah.
So Bob, if you could just really quickly, could you tell everybody that's in the audience where they can find you, how to where would you like for them to go if they would like to purchase one of your books, if they would like to engage with you, where can they find you?
Best place to go is burg.com, and explore the site. There's a lot of resources there, and so forth.
All right.
So
Well, Bob,
burg.com.
Burg, and I'll make sure it's in the show notes. Bob, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really, really appreciate you, and I appreciate the time, my friend.
My pleasure, Corey. Thank you.
Thank you.